Una. Hi guys, welcome to Chavista Chronicles from Caracas. This is Jesus Rodriguez, and today I'm gonna have a nice interview with Valia Rodriguez. She's a Cuban doctor currently residing in the UK, and she, along Helen Jeffrey is her name, right?
Yes, Jaffe.
They Jeffrey they made this new documentary called Cuba COVID-19, um, health, science, and solidarity. And we're gonna talk right now about that new documentary that was just premiered in YouTube a few days ago. But first, I want to talk a little bit about Valia. Valia Rodriguez is a Cuban medical doctor and neuroscientist currently residing in the UK, where she is an associate professor of neurophysiology at Aston University. Before moving to the UK, she worked 25 years in the Cuban Neuroscience Center located in the Scientific Pole of Havana, where she was a professor and senior titular scientist, and she was consultant in critical care neurophysiology at Clinical Surgical Hospital Hermanos Ameijeiras. So, and what I'm gonna do right now is start asking her a few questions about the documentary and about Cuba. And thank you, first of all, Valia, for accepting the invitation to be with us. And my first question is gonna be this one: can you give us some hints about this new documentary that you just premiere?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a real pleasure, Jesus, to be here and have the opportunity to talk to you and the people that usually listen to your program. So, this documentary, as you said, was recently released in YouTube. And as the name said, we tried to show what was the Cuban response to COVID-19 and what was behind the success that Cuba has shown handling the pandemic. We talk about the three aspects. We talk about how health was organized to deal with the problem. We talk about science because COVID-19 is a scientific problem. It's a health problem, but also it's a scientific problem. Was a new pandemic needing to have to develop new strategy, new vaccines, new treatments to find a solution for the pandemic, not only for curing patients or avoiding the contagion, but also for avoiding the spreading. So all that, and also treating all these type of phenomenon that we were witnessing during the pandemic. For example, the cytokine storm that was killing patients in COVID-19 patient that became critical and they needed to go to intensive care. So it was a scientific problem. But also we were showing that despite all challenges that COVID-19 represented for Cuba and for other countries, there was also opportunity to still express solidarity with other countries. That is the case of Cuba sending the Henry Reef brigades to many
Yes.
countries that have requested assistance. In this condition, these brigades go and they go for free without asking for any money, and they pay attention, but also they also bring the warmth and compassion that a patient need. So this brigade has been in Latin America now during the COVID-19 pandemic, in the
In
Caribbean
Venezuela.
region, but also yeah, but also in Europe. So, for
Yes.
example,
In
the first
Africa.
brigade, the first brigade went to Italy, to the Lombardian region. That was one of the first regions that were really suffering from the pandemic. And also, of course, to our brother countries in Africa, to Angola, for
Mm-hmm.
example.
Mm-hmm.
But this brigade has been attacked by the Trump administration.
Yes. Yes.
So, and
I like
so,
that
so
part.
we wanted to show,
I like that part from the documentary because in the documentary you try to cover all those scenes not only related to COVID but related to those attacks and the current conditions on in Cuba in terms of sanctions and blockade. That's one of the things that I like the most about the documentary because it was not only it was focused on COVID, of course, but it also covers all those other aspects of Cuban health that sometimes are just spread all over. You know what I mean? So you try to put everything in one box, and that's what the scene that I like the most about the documentary. And talking about the solidarity in Italy, for example, one of the narrations that I like the most is from a Cuban doctor, talking about in the documentary, talking about how they were applauded for while they were walking to the hospital in a very long street in Italy, and they were overwhelmed by the spontaneity of that solidarity and
yeah,
appreciation from the Italians, right?
exactly, exactly. This is the people. People are grateful. You
Hmm.
know, they're grateful when you're bringing them friendship, but also health. And human warmth. So all those expression of appreciation and gratitude that we didn't go there. I mean, I say we because I am Cuban, so I
Yes,
feel part of that.
of course.
I feel part of that. So we didn't go there for that, but it's something that is normal. We human, we express gratitude with someone else that doesn't know us, come to help us for
And
even for free without for anything in a moment, Jesus, where we are, we are dependable, we are frail, we are scared, we are susceptible to die.
yes.
So yeah, that was very moving. That part of all
Hmm.
these people in
Hmm.
in in Milan
And what you were
applauding the doctors walking.
and what you were talking about covering that aspect of the U.S. gringo attack on the medical Cuban brigade is something very important that you also cover in the documentary that you were just starting to talk when I interrupted you,
It doesn't matter. No,
right?
yes, we wanted to show. So Cuba has, different programs for medical collaboration. We have programs that are for free, like the program that we have been sustaining with some Latin American countries and Haiti. So
Mm.
people that they don't have money, we cannot,
Charge
we go
them.
there for
Hmm.
free,
Exactly.
bringing our doctor. We don't charge for that. It's
Mm.
part of our solidarity, and we are brothers and sisters of, all the
Yes.
south part of the world that we have been, dealing with, fighting for our independence and for
Yes.
keeping our independence. But also we have pay collaboration that are retributed
Like the one
with
with
countries
Venezuela,
that
for example.
yeah, with countries that can pay for that
Mm.
because they can pay for that, and then the money that is received for that, a percentage go to the doctor, and the
Mm.
other percentage go to the health system in Cuba to be able to sustain an universal health system that is free and have
Yes.
complete comprehensive coverage for everybody. So in order
Yes.
to sustain that percentage of the money goes to that. And then there has been attack by several US administration, but especially,
Our good friend Marco Rubio.
oh my God, yes, and
Terrible.
and there also there has been calling like we are the Cuban states are enslaving the
Yes. Yes.
doctor.
Yes. Terrible.
Because the doctor
New
and
slavery,
in
they call it.
documentary
Yes.
and that is not true. It's just propaganda to harm Cuba. These doctors go first because they want to go. They are not forced to go, and they receive the retribution that could
Mm-hmm.
be an stipend when they go for free, or
Mm-hmm.
could be salary that they receive the salary in Cuba, but also they receive a percentage of the salary that the country pay when they go to another country.
Yes.
So, and then we have the Henry Reef Brigade that are specialized in disasters or in very, serious diseases, like it was the case of Ebola
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and now COVID-19. And Cuba sent those brigades for free to help. But we have been attacked for that.
Yes.
And then so that was also shown in the documentary. So by, the doctor that was part of the brigade was explaining the selection process,
Mm-hmm.
how they participate in other initiatives
I
in the
like that
Henry
part.
Reis Brigade and all
Yes.
that. But also, Jesus, we were also talking about solidarity of other people with the war. And that is the case, for example, of the University College London donating
Mm-hmm.
a non-invasive
Machines.
ventilation unit to Cuba. Cuba is developing their own ventilators because the company that used to sell ventilators to Cuba, that was a Swiss company, they were acquired by an American or US company. So
Mm-hmm.
because of the blockade, now this medical company cannot
Cannot do
sell
business.
medical equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cannot sell medical equipment to Cuba,
Yes.
and they cannot even sell spare parts for repairing all or broken ventilators. So Cuba had to start building their own ventilator for facing possible peaks,
Yes.
infection peaks in the COVID-19. And
Thankfully,
then
you didn't
use
have it
an yes,
to use it. I
we
mean,
have the
you didn't
yeah,
have to use
yeah,
them.
exactly.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, just yeah. Thanks for that. The infection was not so high in Cuba, but
Mm,
we needed to be prepared.
of
We
course.
needed to be prepared because still COVID-19 will last for a while. We will be, facing this new way of living for a while.
Yes.
We will be, sharing our life with the virus for a while.
Mm,
So anyway, Cuba was using an open design made by the University College London to build this ventilator, and this open designs is a way of showing collaboration and solidarity with
yes.
the war. Another was using and also was using an open design from Massachusetts Institute of Technology for this
Mm,
for manufacturing an invasive modality, an invasive ventilator. So that is other way of where human beings can collaborate and can be solidarian one with each other. So we spoke about that also in the documentary.
that's fine.
Mhm.
That's fine. Thank you for your information about the documentary. I invite everyone to go to YouTube and Google Cuba COVID-19 health, science, and solidarity, and you will find the documentary there. And the second question, Valia, uh, what is it? Was it difficult to produce it, the documentary? I mean, under current COVID-19 limitations, and can you tell us if you have touring plans for the promotion of the documentary?
Yeah, well, we needed to adapt.
Define touring first.
Yeah, yeah, that is. But we needed to adapt first because at the beginning, the idea was that me and the producer and director of the documentary, we were going to go to Cuba
Of course.
and start interviewing the scientists, doctors, patients, so all the persons that now you can see in the document. But that wasn't possible because among the measures that Cuba took to deal with COVID-19, so Cuba closed the border and we
Mm,
couldn't fly, so we couldn't enter in Cuba. So then we made contact with a project that is in Cuba that is called the Belly of the Beast. That is a project with an American or US. I don't like to say American because we are
me
American
neither.
too. We are
Yes,
part of the
yes.
big
Me
America.
neither. I call them U.S. citizens or gringos.
Well, I don't want to call them gringo, but yeah, let's say with one with one U.S. Journalist and a British journalist. They are
Hmm.
in Cuba producing a series of small videos for a bigger documentary that was already released that is called The War on Cuba, that is reflecting or showing how the US blockade impact the life of Cubans in different level of different sector of the society. It's a great documentary that also I recommend to watch because it's very informative. So this project, the Belly of the Beast, we talked to them, and they started collaborating with us. We sent all the script with the questions, and we programmed the interviews from the United Kingdom. That fortunately that worked very well,
Hmm.
and we made the interviews in that way. So they sent over the interviews, and then we edited and we put together the documentary. It was a hard work, and especially the documentary, the idea of the documentary, Dr. Helen Jaffe, that is a professor of social science at Glasgow University, she
Hmm.
got some funding to make this documentary for a festival of social science at her university in Glasgow. So then we had a deadline. So we needed to finish the
Hmm.
documentary for November. And we got the last interview 1 week before. So
Wow,
it was really
that's
very
wow.
hard to do it, but well, we managed. And the documentary was presented in this festival and also in a movie festival, a film festival in Glasgow that is called Havana Glasgow Film Festival. That was the week after, both in November. And then also we have been presenting in different events. That is part of the touring. That is
Hmm.
a digital online
Yes,
touring
yes,
because we cannot travel. So that
of
is
course.
part of the new life, going
Yes,
online.
that's fine.
So, and yeah, we
You
have an
had
interview also with,
one
sorry,
question.
sorry.
One question. Do you have too much back and forwards in the editing of the videos with Cuba, with the Cuban partners? I suspect that it was not like, yes, we did the interviews and we send them and you edited. I believe that maybe you had to go back and forwards, or you didn't.
No, we didn't. We had a lot of questions and we made similar questions to the scientists, for example.
Okay. Okay.
And also, we have so much material, Jesus,
I
so
got it.
much material,
I got it.
and we have to cut.
Of
We
course.
needed to make only 1 hour.
Of course.
So we had so much. So then we were selecting
That's
a
fine.
specific segments, organizing, put it in order for
Hmm.
making to make a flow
Of course.
in the documentary, to tell the story. And I think
You did a
that
nice
maybe I am
work.
biased, but I think we to see it. Yeah.
Yes, you did a nice work. I'm sure of
Yeah.
that. I watched the documentary. And well, now
Wow.
I'm going to the third questions. We know
Yeah.
that in Cuba, as well as in Venezuela, the material conditions of millions has been affected by the U.S. blockade and sanctions. How do you see the spirit? It might not be connected directly to the documentary, but somehow it is, I believe. But the question is, how do you see the spirit of the Cubans and the prospect of for Cuba in terms of the effects? Because as I was telling you when we were off the cameras, uh, I know that the conditions also in Cuba as well as in Venezuela has been very affected by the blockade. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it is it's related. It's very closely
Mm.
related
Yes.
because now during the pandemic, you see even more the effects of the U.S. blockade on Cuba.
Mm.
And it's amazing. Even during the blockade, they have tightened even more the blockade and they
Mm.
have imposed new measures
Yes.
during the pandemic.
Yes.
So it's so
Criminal.
inhumane and cruel
Yes.
and criminal.
Yes.
And it's sometimes it's so absurd that you cannot really believe it.
That is
And some
happening.
people
Yes.
maybe they doubt about that because they cannot really believe because it's such an absurd measure.
Mm.
But anyway, yeah, the United States tightened the measures. There were more persecution of financials and commercial transactions, would make Cuba possibility to acquire product even harder. So it was a persecution of, for example, transportation, so vessels coming to Cuba, and I think Venezuela was also
Yes.
have that during
Yes.
this 2020 2019 period, where
Mm-hmm.
United States has been actively persecuting. It had an active
Ships.
war
Yes.
against the ships, against the vessels for transporting oil
Mm-hmm.
or transporting other type of goods.
Yes.
In the case of Venezuela, out of Venezuela. In the case of Cuba, to Cuba, because we are an island. So
Yes.
we need vessels coming, bringing products for our shops, markets, and everything.
Cool.
So that is one reason. That is one thing. They were also tightening a restriction, for example, in remittances. We have a community of Cuba living abroad, and they has been persecuting and
Yes.
canceling and punishing platforms that they were managing transactions or remittances of money to Cuba, and that make the life of the Cuban living in
Worse.
Cuba very hard. But
Yes.
how, from where they were going to acquire some of the money that they needed to buy food, for example. So that was one thing.
Haven't you
The
yourself affected by those measures with your family?
Yeah, of course,
Yes.
of course. Unfortunately, I am in the UK, and because I am in the
Mm.
UK, the
You have.
community
Yes,
is
that's
not
true.
as big
In the
as in
U.S.
Miami. The main problem, exactly, is the people that are living in the US, and you know that most of the
There's a lot
migration
of
of the
people
Cuban
in
has
the
been
U.S.
to the US more than to Europe. So
Mm.
those are especially the communities that has been more affected. And so far now, there is not a way, not a legal way of sending money from the US, from for the Cubans living in the US to the families in Cuba, because they also shut down the Western Union. That was
Do
the
you?
last resort
Maybe we
that
are
they had.
share. Let me interrupt you because I want to share some tricks that we have. Maybe you do that in Cuba, and maybe they will try to locate that too. But anyway, a lot of people here in Venezuela, for example, there's a lot of remittances also. Uh, I mean that people receive in Venezuela, and they have
Yes.
been trying to cut all those financial lines with remittance companies and things like that. But people in the US that want to send money to Venezuela, what they do is that they found someone Venezuelan that have an account in dollars in the US, and they sell the dollars to them, but they transfer the money to one in Venezuela. So you know what I'm trying to tell you? I mean, the money
Yes,
remains
yes.
in the
You
U.S., but in our case, the bolivars
exactly,
goes to the accounts of your
exactly,
family. That's a way in which we has been managed to deal with remittances.
exactly. You always find a way. You know,
Yes.
we Latin Americans, we because we have been fighting for so long for surviving,
Mhm.
we find way of adapting,
Yes. Yes.
adapting to the moment. We don't have,
But
but for
I'm not
that
saying
reason,
that that's the best solution because sometimes it's hard. I mean, it's better if you have a company that you can trust and that you can demand that you can, make accountable than dealing with sometimes with people that you don't know and things like that. So it affects anyway.
exactly because for that reason, I said legal way of sending
Hmm.
money
Hmm.
to from
Hmm.
the US to Cuba.
Yes.
Other
Yes.
ways there is. People have, they when they travel, they bring money, they send
Hmm.
money to a third country, but people lose money also in that way, and then they are victims of a scam,
Hmm.
fraud,
Hmm.
and so
That
on.
happened.
So for
That
that reason,
happened.
I said legal. So that is one way. The other problem is that Cuba had closed the border, and as you know, we are an island, so most of everything that comes to Cuba comes through the border.
Yes.
So that means that tourism, that
Mm-hmm.
is the
Mm-hmm.
main income for Cuba, stopped.
Yes.
So
Yes.
no money was entering in Cuba, and Cuba had the border closed from March, since March to September or August.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
in most, especially Havana Airport, open beginning of November. That
Mm-hmm.
is the main airport in Cuba. So that meant that Cuba didn't have any money circulating. So no money was entering in the country.
Mm-hmm.
No money.
Yes,
So
that's right.
that then created a crisis
Mm.
because we didn't have product. If you don't have money, you cannot buy. You don't have capacity for buying.
Yes.
And then shops were empty. The government has to find solutions to place a specific, to plan very well, to put resources in all the small shops in neighborhood to guarantee the minimum to people.
Mm-hmm. To
People
survive.
start queuing, then you have the huge queue to all these hardships that Cuba
Yes.
has to face because the blockade is there, because the blockade is impeding vessels, or if the vessel comes, then they are punishing the vessels for
Yes.
coming to Cuba, then they don't want to come next time, or we don't have the money. It's very hard. It's very hard.
Yes.
And yes, of course, all that harder during the COVID-19.
Of course.
And you can see that in the huge queues in Cuba, lack of some product and that. But despite of that, and I want to say that, Jesus, because it's fair, the
Mm-hmm.
government has tried to put the essentials in the hands of people, organizing the way that they distribute the product. They
That's right.
also have to take new measures. For example, they make shops in U.S. dollar. The
Yes.
U.S. dollar was not a
I read
currency in
about that.
Cuba. Now
Yes.
it's a provisional measure.
Mm.
It's not going to be forever. It's just now was a way of, taking money,
It's like here in
hard
Venezuela.
currency to
It's like
be
here in
able to
Venezuela.
buy.
In Venezuela, for the last 2 years, the dollar has been taken. I believe that is more radical in Venezuela than what happens in Cuba, because since 2018 in Venezuela, we have been having the dollar, taking control of most of the economy. I mean, it's crazy, and a lot of people, especially from the left, criticize Maduro because they say that he's surrendered to the IMF or
Yes, to the
whatever, but
capitalist.
they don't understand that it's like at least from my perspective, that it's a tactical move that the government have to do in order to try to compensate all the unbalance that the economy has. And in our case, the
Yes.
attack on the Bolivar has been happening at least for 5 or 10 years. No, like 5 or 8 years. So it's crazy.
No. It's very hard, and we sometimes we don't have options, and sometimes they are not the best solutions, but that is the solution that allows us to survive and to keep running other programs that are benefiting the population. So
Yes.
if you see that from the individual point of view, you you think that it could be very unfair to people, especially, for example, families that
Mhm.
they don't have
access
anyone
access
in
to dollar.
abroad. Exactly. It's hard on
Yes.
them. And
Yes.
then, of course, that creates inequalities in the society that
That's
we are
true.
not happy about.
That's true.
And because of that, the government is a, is a provisional measure to solve the hard problem that COVID-19 have created for not being able, to bring a new currency, for bring money in the country.
Mhm.
I hope that that won't be
For too long.
lasting much more than yeah, for more than 6 months. I don't think that will be 1 year, because the government is aware of the problems also that the measure created, but was a
Yes.
way of surviving, for
Mhm.
surviving.
Mhm.
So at the same time, Cuba is reorganizing the economy. And do you know we have double currency in Cuba? We have the
Yes.
Cuban pesos and the Cuban convertible.
Mhm.
And it
So
has
you
been
see.
like that for a while now. Yeah, the CUC and the COP. So now
Mhm.
Cuba is changing that. So many products in Cuba, they are subsidized, and you are able to buy things. I mean, you can buy the basic with your ration card for less than $1 per month.
Mm,
So, and you can do that because all those products are subsidized by the government. So we
perfect.
need to stop that and start subsidizing people and not the products.
Yes.
Because then you cannot have a strong economy and you cannot create a strong economy. So Cuba has been struggling with all that at the same time that has been dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic.
That's
So
true.
yeah, it has been hard.
Yes, yes.
But
And when
let
I
me say,
whenever uh-huh.
no, I want to say that in spite of that, we are resilient. Okay,
Yes.
we are resilient, and the Cuban has a strong conviction that we need to keep our independence and the
Yes.
capacity to decide by ourselves.
That's the way
So
it
we
is.
can have domestic problems, and Cuba could have right now, if you check in the news, there has been some internal contradiction, dialogue, things like that. But the conviction that we need to keep independence and to be
Mhm.
able to protect what the revolution have achieved in
Mhm.
these almost 60 years, that is, protecting the poorest, protecting the weaker, protecting the people that are more dependable, like the elderly, the children, the sick. That is
Mhm.
something that Cuban has very clear.
That's true. That's true. And it's inspiring what you are saying, but I cannot stop thinking about Venezuela when you are talking about all the problems in Cuba because it's very similar. I mean, the level of things
Yeah.
that we are passing through right now is very similar to what you just narrated. But let's jump to
How
the
has
last
been
question.
COVID-19?
Ah,
Okay, I was going to ask you about COVID-19 in Venezuela. How have been Venezuela dealing with COVID-19?
I believe that I have one more question for you anyway, but I'm gonna answer your question first. I believe that President Maduro and the government has been dealing maravillosamente, we say in Spanish, marvelous, dealing with the pandemic, in a very responsible way. And I believe
Yeah,
that's one of the most important things.
yeah.
Is absolutely the opposite or what Trump did in the US, for example, and that have created that catastrophe because that doesn't have any other name. I mean, what is happening right now in the US is a catastrophe. Yesterday I was checking the numbers and they are already in 300,000 deaths. That's a lot of people. And they are right now in a phase of more than 3,000 deaths a day. That means that maybe by the end of December, they will have 400,000 people dead just out of COVID. That's crazy. But anyway, going back to Venezuela, what Maduro did was absolutely the opposite. In the very beginning, he took harsh measures, not mandatory, not a curfew that with people, I mean, the army would put you in jail, in jail because you went to the street after a certain hour, not like in the UK a few days ago, or some European countries. I mean, what Maduro said was, we are going to close this several economic areas and we're gonna just going to keep working the essential ones. You have to use face mask. That's mandatory, but it's not like that they are gonna put you in jail if you don't wear it. The worst things that we did, I mean, worst between quotations, was that at the beginning when people was some people were trying to resist the face mask thing, is that they created this program of sending people, if they caught it twice with not wearing masks, they send it to like a school, like a workshop about COVID for a whole day. So
Okay,
that was the punishment between quotations. So I mean, the approach has been great, taking into consideration that we don't have the money. Venezuela have received in the last year and a half like 40, like 500 million dollars out of exporting anything. I mean, from the government side. I mean, from the government industry. I'm talking here about gold, oil, everything. But 5 years ago, Venezuela, in the same period, my the average was like $50,000 million a year. So that gives you a sense on how bad the Venezuelan economy is doing. And besides that, Maduro was also able, with the help of the Cubans, the Chinese, the Russians, even the Turkey, a lot of alliance with countries that are sympathetic to us, that have a nice, close, friendly relationship with us. We were able to deal with the COVID, and the Cubans at the beginning of the pandemic, they are still very important, but at the beginning of the pandemic was more evident because we, during the first months of the pandemic, started this program of going house to house to do the screenings of everyone. And I believe that 7 out of 10 of the people that participated in those screening campaigns were Cubans. I mean,
Yeah.
and there were a big number of Cuban doctors that came, yes, to help during that phase of the pandemic. And that was very important because it helps the government to identify where the areas with COVID, and with that information, you can take, public health decisions. So I believe that was key. The responsibility in which the government approached the problem, and disregarding the fact that we are Latinos and we love to hug and kiss and jump over each other. Disregarding that, we have been able to keep a uh, uh, very nice numbers. Our infection number is kind of high. I believe that it is already around 109,000 people or reported with COVID, but the number of deaths in Venezuela has been is not already in the thousand. I believe that we are in 930 something. So if you ask me for the death per million inhabitants, the numbers of Venezuela is 32 deaths per million inhabitants, which is nothing if you compare it with the gringos number that is like 900 or something, 800, which is crazy. So anyway, I mean, I believe that the approach of Venezuela has been great. We use a reopening scheme called 7+7. The government closed some areas of the economy, as I told you at the beginning. I mean, only the ones related to food and pharmacies were open for 1 week when we started the reopening, like in October or something like that. Uh, and the other week, uh, other sectors, not all the sectors, but other sectors of the economy were opening. But then the next week we went back to the quarantine, and we keep doing that. We have been doing that for the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, I believe. And but this December, the Venezuelan President Maduro decided to, thinking in Christmas, to reopen all the sectors. But yesterday he said publicly that he was scared by the number of people that he saw on the street, and it's crazy. I've seen some photos and videos of people doing shopping and partying, which is alarming. And but as I told you, Maduro has been very responsible, trying to approach. And yesterday, he talked about those things, and I believe that if the government sees that things are is going back out of control, the government is going to take
Once
the
again, to
measures that
take the
are going
measure.
to be
Yeah.
necessary, because here the government is not responding only to the economy. I mean, the most important thing for our government is the people. So I believe that's one of the difference between our countries and capitalist countries. And that takes me to my next question, which is
Okay, go ahead.
to you,
Shoot.
is how do you compare COVID-19 response in socialist countries or progressive countries with the ones in capitalist countries. And I'm asking you this because you're a doctor, because you have the experience of the COVID, but because you are Cuban also and you live in the UK, so you can give us a sense of your opinion on that.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I think the advantage that the socialist country have is that they can put resources where the resources are needed at the moment that they are needed, and things are
Subjected.
not following the commerce, or
Mm,
they how how from where the money comes, but
mm,
it's always putting the population at the center. So
exactly.
that is one thing. It's one thing. So it's not about business.
Mm,
It's not about making money. It's about people.
yes.
Because it's about people, and because in the socialist country, the main resources are in the hand of the state. Also, you can put resources that are essentials where they are needed when they are needed. And that has been, for example, in Cuba, essential in the way that you organize the response, how the resources were distributed, human resources, but also material resources and
Yes.
money, because you need money to pay and buy things
Mm,
dynamically for facing the disease.
the
And that
crisis.
is that advantage that the socialist country have. However, in the capitalism, you have other interests, another resorts, another key, other
Interest.
interests that move how the country respond to things. So things are scattered, money is scattered. So you have companies. So the health is privatized. So
Mm,
it's very hard to organize a common front to face a pandemic as this. So you have to conciliate too many interests that are not the people, but are more commercial interests, monetary interests, and that. And also, looking from another point of view, for example, here in the UK, one of the sectors that has been more affected, people have been losing money a lot because you live from the money that you are able to produce yourself. You have your own business,
of
and the
course.
business has been closing, especially the hospitality sector is closing. So restaurants, hotels,
Hmm.
cafeterias, pubs, shops,
Yes.
everything is closed. People, unemployment grows, so people have been fired, people lose jobs, people are losing money because sometimes, for example, you have a pub. Now, the pub here in the UK is like a bar or
Mm,
something where you can also
hmm.
have food for the people. But I guess most of your listeners know what is a pub. But
Yes.
anyway, so so then you are buying things like a, tonnels of beer, and then you have to throw that away
Yes.
when the business closed, and then you are losing money. So it has been really terrible for people. But also the way that you manage the money to put the money in the health sector. So you cannot do it as easily, as free as you are doing that in a socialist country. So this is the intrinsic contradiction of both systems.
Yes. Of
But
capital.
beyond that, you can see the number. Exactly. It's the capital versus something that is more
Humanity.
humane.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. It's centered in the human being and not in the money that is the essence of the capitalist
Listen,
economy.
Valia. Sorry to interrupt you, but something that strike me is that I was expecting something bad happening in the U.S. because they don't have a health system. They don't have it. I mean,
Exactly.
but in Europe, that always has been publicized, like countries that disregarding being capitalist, like the UK, for example, had a nice health system. The numbers are also catastrophic.
High.
So what
It's
do you?
very high.
Sorry to
Yeah.
distract you
Yeah,
for
it's
the
very
first
high.
question, but it's like I don't get it. Do you have an opinion on that?
No, no, yeah. For example, if you look at the number of deaths per million, and you compare the US and the UK is worse because
Exactly.
the number of deaths per million in the UK is 927,
Wow.
while in the US, the number of deaths per million is 906. So they are more or less the same. So
That
what
is
happened in the
worse.
UK? The UK has the NHS, that is the National Health System, that is
Hmm.
great, is free, accessible for everybody. However, it's lacking money, it's lacking personnel. So because they don't have all the money that they should have, and it
Hmm.
has been shortage, has been cutting the money
Yes.
over the years that they are spending in the NHS. And now you are seeing the results of that. That is one thing. The other thing was that the response to the COVID-19 from the beginning, and was very important
That's
because
true.
that bias
Mm.
completely, exactly, the response to the pandemic, the
That's
response was very slow. They
irresponsible.
were
Yes.
yeah, they were trying to conciliate interest,
Hmm.
interest,
Hmm.
and then they were not taking the necessary measures from the beginning. And then you had an explosion. And when
Yes.
you have suddenly a huge amount of people with a COVID-19 walking in the streets, so you cannot control how many people are going to die because the proportion of people that die are proportional to the people that are infected with the
Mm.
COVID-19. So yeah, that was so sad, so sad.
Yes.
And that is a point of comparison with Cuba, for example. And let's
Hmm.
take again the case of Cuba,
Hmm. Hmm.
taking measures from the very beginning. But not only that, preparing in advance, because the first case of COVID-19 in Cuba was in March. But Cuba was preparing since November, December, when the pandemic started to sound, to make
Yes.
noise in China. So preparing the system, preparing the personnel, to coordinate how we are going to organize, how we are going to interact, all that we are showing in the documentary.
Hmm. Hmm.
And let's go again. I have here some number for you
That's nice. Yes. Let's see them.
about death rate per country. So let's
Hmm.
talk about socialist country.
Okay.
Cuba has a death rate per million of 12.
Nothing.
China has a death rate per million of 3. 3, because the pandemic start in China, they have an increase, a very huge number, but they control it.
Yes.
And the deaths are around 4,000 in a population that is over the billion.
Hmm.
So at the end, the
It's
number of deaths
almost
per
nothing.
million is 3. It's
Yes.
nothing, despite the total number is not little.
Hmm.
Vietnam, a country that we hear about Vietnam in the news, for
Hmm.
example. Almost no one talk about Vietnam. Vietnam has a death rate per million of zero point 0.4. zero
Yes.
point
Almost.
0.4.
And that's almost nothing.
And even Nicaragua and Venezuela, they are
Hmm.
not socialist country, but still the
Yes.
governments are progressive, anti-imperialist government that have been trying to take measures to protect the population. So
Hmm.
Venezuela is 33
Yes.
per million, and Nicaragua 34. However, France is 371, UK is 927, as I
That's
said
crazy.
before,
Uh-huh.
the US 906. So I think the numbers speak by themselves.
Yes, yes, yes. And it's important to highlight that because, as you already said, I mean, our governments care more about the people than about the interests of the capital. So that's key. That's not the only solution to COVID, but that's key. The other
Yeah,
important is the responsible approach to deal with the virus, right?
I think, Jesus, that this number is telling things for the future. Something is wrong. As Helen, that is a social scientist, said at the end of
Hmm.
the documentary, maybe the governments, the capitalist country, the capitalist governments in the developed countries, they are not ready to listen to this yet. As a people is scared of everything that sounds socialism because
Hmm.
it's like communism, and people is, ooh,
They think
it's
that
the
they're
devil.
gonna breakfast
However,
kids in the morning.
Oh my God. Yeah,
Sure.
okay, maybe they are not ready for that, but something is wrong. And the
That's right.
pandemic has shown that is something is very wrong
That's
in
right.
the way that the system and the societies are organized.
That's
And the
right.
health systems need priority. They need priority before any other thing, because we are we are exposed when then something like this happens. Everybody is exposed.
That's fine. That's fine. I believe that that those are all my questions for you, Valia.
I have
So
one question for you,
yes, go ahead. Go
if you
ahead.
allow me.
Yes, of
So,
course.
do you know that Cuba has been developing vaccines? So, right now we have 4 vaccines in clinical
Yes.
trial, but I read in the news that Venezuela is considering to use a Sputnik vaccine.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
so I would like to know if there is some advances of that, if you are doing clinical trial, if you know there has
Yes.
been some clinical trials on that, or you have been planning
Yes.
to start
Yes.
vaccination.
Yes. No. In Venezuela, we started clinical trials with the Sputnik 5 vaccine. I believe that in October we started with that. I believe that they were like 2,000 or 20,000. I don't remember exactly. Uh, People chosen to receive
Uh-huh.
the vaccination. And President Maduro announced a few weeks ago that we were going to start a vaccination program maybe on April 2021. So he already have like a date for that. I mean, unexpected timing for that vaccination program. Uh, Here in Venezuela, what you hear the most is the Sputnik 5 vaccine because all those other ultra publicized pharmaceutical companies doing making vaccines like Pfizer and Moderna and those ones that are the ones publicized by mainstream media. They don't do we won't be able to buy those vaccines because of sanctions. I mean, Maduro said it's himself. I mean, a few months ago. I
Yes,
mean, we are not allowed to buy them, and I believe that is great because the things that I have read about those vaccines are not I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not an expert anyway, but they require a lot of things. They have some technical requirements, and the percentage of efficiency is not the best. And anyway, so I believe that we are going with the Russian vaccine, and I believe that Maduro also mentioned Cuba. So we should be. He haven't talked too much about that, but I believe that that we should be doing something with the Cuban doctors to also try Soberana one here. But I haven't heard anything about trials of Soberana one in Venezuela.
I see.
Maybe that has
Yeah.
not been publicized, uh, but when Maduro talked about the vaccination using the Russian Sputnik 5, he mentioned other countries. And when he said other countries, the first thing that came to my mind was
Cuba.
Cuba, but maybe China because the vaccine from China appears to that from what I read seems to be running very smoothly the trials. So I don't know. Maybe we will use a mix of Russian, Chinese, and Cuban vaccines. But that's a very complicated issue. I'm very scared because sometimes you read like bad news about the vaccines and the effects that they have. So I'm always like, wow, I'm not sure if I'm going to
Sure.
work as a piggy. How do they say it in English?
Sure.
Uh, anyway,
I
I
mean, after the vaccine passed the clinical trials,
mm,
it's safe to use them. If they have proven to be safe, and that is why you do clinical trial phase, especially phase 1 and phase 2, is for
yes,
safety. If they pass that, then you can use it. Still, some people will have reactions, like
yes,
happened with the Pfizer vaccine here in the UK, that
hmm
some people have some allergic reaction. But for Cuba will be the same. We cannot buy Pfizer because Pfizer doesn't sell products to Cuba
Okay.
because of the blockade.
They did that
So
to with
then that
Venezuela,
is,
but mm-hmm. Go ahead.
yeah, that is why we are developing our own vaccine that for sure Cuba is going to put available for
Have you
for
read
other countries like
the
Venezuela.
have you read something about the trials in Cuba? Do you have some information about
Yeah.
the Soberana 1 trials? That might be interesting to hear.
We have Soberana 1 and Soberana 2. Both are in trials. Soberana 1 has been a little more advanced than Soberana 2.
Mm-hmm.
So they are two type of subunit vaccine, meaning that one part is from a known vaccine and the other part of the vaccine is the protein from COVID-19
Mm-hmm.
virus that all vaccines are using. So they are doing phase 1, 2 at the same time together, and they will finish because they use two dosage as Pfizer also do. So you need
Mm-hmm.
two vaccination, a
Sputnik
vaccination
2.
and a booster. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Sputnik 2. Then the trials will end in January, and after that they will pass to phase 3, where they are increasing the number of people to be vaccinated. So, but now we have two other vaccines that
That's
is
what I
a
hear about.
Mambisa and Abdala. The
Okay,
different
I
type of
didn't know
vaccine,
their
they are
numbers.
not subunits.
Emambisa and Abdallah. Are-
Abdala and
Okay,
Mambisa, these two different
Mambisa.
vaccines.
Okay,
Mambisa. You know, the Mambisas in Cuba were fighting against the Spanish during the
that's nice.
colonization.
That's
So
nice.
Mambisa,
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
that is the Mambisa. And Abdala is a character, the someone that was defending his own land against the invaders. And that is a poem from our national poet, Jose Marti, that is
That's
called like
nice.
that, Abdala, like a symbol of rebellion and fighting for your country. So Abdala. So then these two vaccines, Abdala is Mambisa. Mambisa is intranasal. So they are expecting a high response to that, and especially that is going to be especially good for children if the response is good. In the preclinical trials, the response was amazingly good. So they
Okay.
have hopes with this, especially with this vaccine Mambisa, but they are also testing the other one that is Abdala. The difference between the two is in the type of culture where they are they are
Develop.
it's the type of cell culture that is used to develop the vaccine.
Mm,
So yeah, so we will see.
that's
We will
fine.
see
I hope that at some point we should be able to also get the help of Cubans with the vaccine
for
too.
sure.
Thank you, Valia.
Don't doubt that we are brothers and sisters. We save together
We are, we are. I'm sure of that, and I truly believe in that. I mean, Cuba. I mean, not only Cuba, but I'm one of those that believes in Bolivar conception of the Patria Grande, and for me, Mexico, from Mexico to Argentina, Chile, we are the same people. But of course, with Cuba, it's like an special relation that President Chavez, especially President
eh,
Chavez, was managed to build and make us Venezuelans more sensible to Cuba. Even though when I was a child with my father, which was a very progressive guy, I joined him going to the Casas de la Amistad Cubano-Venezolanas in my hometown, Ciudad Bolivar, that is a very tiny city in the south of Venezuela, and there was a Casa de la Amistad Cubano-Venezolana, and sometimes he asked me to join him uh, uh, to go for an event or whatever they had organized there. So for me, Cuba has been always there, and I really enjoy talking with to you, Vania. I hope that we can continue cooperating, and I wish you the best with the documentary. I wish you to travel a lot promoting it.
yeah, traveling online. So remember, Cuba and COVID-19. Cuba and COVID-19. Health,
Yes.
science, and education and solidarity in YouTube. You can find it in YouTube.
Yes, Cuba, COVID-19, health, science, and solidarity. You just Google it on YouTube or Google, and you will find it. Thank you again, Vania and Valia, and I really enjoyed talking to you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
Bye bye.